Good morning, ChangeNOW Day 2, and welcome to this, what is going to be an amazing session on transparency and traceability. Extremely important topic. My name is James Bidwell. I am your moderator. I am the CEO of Springwise. Springwise is a major ecosystem partner for ChangeNOW. We have the largest online innovation library for positive solutions for the planet in the world. Oh, thank you. I'm not the main thing. So today what we're going to do is we're going to have a keynote. We're then going to have a panel with amazing panelists. And then we're going to have a fireside chat. And we are going to try and put some context around this really important subject. And we're going to try and inspire you to think about it differently and really take action. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm really delighted that as the keynote, we have someone who is actually one of the solutions that you find out there. He's an entrepreneur. He is a change maker. He is a pioneer. He has a business that's only been going for a couple of years, and it's called OpenClimat, or OpenClimat. And he's going to tell his story, and he's going to share how he's making a massive impact to set the context for this session on traceability and transparency. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Vincent Pappolla from OpenClimat.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Thank you, James, for the introduction. I'm very happy to be here talking about a subject that means so much to me. Embracing transparency. What is a great day. What a great start of the day for all of us. As James introduced, I am the CEO and co-founder of OpenClimat. This is a... Sorry. Obviously, it doesn't work. Anyway, I just asked the technical stuff. OK. Hi, technical. It doesn't work. OK. So OpenClimat is an open information platform on which you can find information on companies' climate action. It is accessible to everyone, so that everyone can go and look for companies, what is carbon footprint, does it have reduction targets, where it stands today in terms of results, and what is the action plan to go further. So the idea here is to help everyone access companies' climate information on climate, but also on water and biodiversity. So obviously here today, these transparency topics means a lot to me. But what about you? I wanted to know, among you, who knows transparency? So among you, who knows what CDP, Climate Disclosure Project, is? Please raise your hand. OK, great. Who knows what the CSRD, the new EU regulation, is? And, OK. And who among you did fill a report for your company on CDP or CSRD? OK, there's a lot of you. That's good. Well, we all know it's a lot of information to disclose. That is very, very, very long to prepare. But today, you may find it counterintuitive. But I'm going to tell you why transparency will make you happy. It will make you thrive in a changing world. Did you ever wonder why, when there is a change in regulation with mandatory disclosure, some companies are so panicked, why some others seem so prepared? Why some companies are known for their ESG action, both externally and internally, while in some others, people from their own company doesn't know what their own company is doing for sustainability? Why is it that this is always the same companies, CSO, Chief Sustainability Officers, from Bouygues, from Accor, from Kering, that goes and make conferences and inspire us? And why is it that Bell, the manufacturer that produced La Vache qui rit, Babybel, why is it that it is Bell that made the first ever commercial contract with climate-linked conditions with the French retailer Carrefour? Why Bell? Why not Danone, that is 10 times larger? Well, all of these companies are not necessarily the best performance in terms of carbon reduction. So why them? they just got that transparency spirit in their corporate culture. Most of companies, most of the decision makers of the old world, for most of them, transparency defies all logic. It takes time. Transparent companies reveal their difficulties, their challenges in a world where companies are supposed to be champions. Transparent companies, they share their innovation to the outside in a competitive world. So despite all that, they do that. They do it and they are happier doing it. Regardless of their size, regardless of their industries, transparent companies are the new leaders. They challenge the old ways of doing business. It takes courage and it takes vision, but guess what? They are already rewarded for it. Okay. They all understood that we live in a world in transition. People understood. It's not working.
Yeah, it's about microphone.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, okay. Ils sont en train de regarder pour le PowerPoint.
Okay, technical. You hear me well? Okay, I'm here myself. Thanks for the applause. So they all understood that we live in a world in transition. People understood that our economy is having impact on the environment, so that our companies are having impact on the environment. And so these impacts are very real. They impact the people in fine, and the people are the company stakeholders. So yes, people will continue to ask questions in how companies you are reducing your impact, and you will receive more and more questions. And answering may appear totally counterintuitive in the old way of doing business, but transparency is not about getting your industrial secrets. Transparency is something else. Your people want to know how you reduce their environment, they want to decarbonize, and they want to know if that's going to be with you. So great leader, yes, it's working again. So great leader, they just see transparency as an opportunity to take their full place in a changing world. By being transparent, they lead climate action, they act with their ecosystem. And because it's just the best way to tackle climate change. Imagine a world where all companies are transparent. Stakeholders can find any information on any company. They can understand it, they can compare it with the other company, and they can use it. In this world, it creates a virtuous dynamic of action. All this empowerment of the citizens, on the B2B clients, on the talents, it creates a virtuous dynamic of action. In such a world, companies share how they reduce emissions. In such a world, companies can inspire their competitors and be inspired by their competitors. So transparency is actually the fastest way to tackle climate change. And it just feels good to contribute, to be part of this world as a company, but also as an individual. It's just, you do it to scale climate action, obviously, but you do it for you. Secondly, and in a more pragmatic view, because we live in a world where the economy is a lot, and it means a lot, by being transparent, you can prove to the ecosystem what you do and that you meet their expectations. So you can take it as an opportunity to drive client preferences, to attract the best talents, and to make your people proud. So even business-wise, it all makes sense. And lastly, companies that are transparent, they just stop running after the next disclosure obligation. By being transparent, they understand one step ahead what the next questionnaire will be. If you're a big company, CSRD is coming, and then that's CSDDD, and then your retailer's questionnaire, and then your talent questionnaire. If you're small companies, you probably have questionnaires from your B2B clients, and then CSRD will impact your B2B clients, and then you will have more questionnaires for them, and then the CSRD will impact on you. So transparent companies, they just anticipate. They have the time to understand why it's so important for their stakeholders. So they have the time to understand it, to prepare it, and making it more useful. Anticipate obligation, drive preferences from their clients, scale climate action. That's what transparency is about. That's all the benefits of transparency. I got an example for you. Bell, you know, the manufacturing producer of La Bachillerie and Bell. This is how Bell turned a very new and a very difficult data request from their retailers and turned it into the first ambitious collaboration between a manufacturer and a retailer. And they turned it into a commercial differentiator with their clients. 4 years ago, they developed the carbon tracking tool to sensitize their employees internally so that they can know all of their products, what is the carbon footprint on that, they can follow it, and they understand their impact as a team and as a brand. Thanks to that, 4 years later, retailers start to be aware of climate change, and they start sending questionnaires in order to get data from their manufacturer, because the carbon of Bell, when sold by the retailers, become the carbon of the retailer. And so when that trend comes, Bell are just prepared. They have all it takes to answer the needs of their retailers. Sorry. Okay, and so they are the first that can address the expectations of the retailer. They are ahead of Danone, they are ahead of Nestlé, they are ahead of Unilever, and they're only a €3 billion turnover company. So, thanks to this culture of transparency, they are ready for every reporting. They turned that into a very ambitious collaboration to scale climate action, and they turned that into a commercial agreement that is beneficial for them. And moreover, the word got out, and they are now among the leaders of the decarbonization of their sectors. And it's not all about the resources. It's not all about the climate maturity that you have. There are some good companies that are more performant than Bell in terms of carbon reduction, but that are less known. There are examples where good companies in terms of impact are penalized by their lack of transparency. The example of Danone. Danone is a €30 billion company, 10 times larger than Bell. In 2021, Oxfam, the NGO, published a report comparing the climate action of all companies from the CAC 40, the 40 largest companies in France. In this report, Danone happens to be not well ranked in this report. At the time, 2021, Danone is AAA rated on CDP for 5 years. They are one of the first to achieve their peak emissions in 2019, and since that moment, they reduce at fast speed their carbon emission. So how come Danone end up so poorly ranked? In the same, just near to Air France, the airplane company. So transparency. Sorry. So because it was. If you expect all your stakeholders to go and see your annual reports, compare it of all companies, and get the right information, you're not transparent. And because here, it was with an NGO, but it could happen with talent ranking, it could happen with retailers, and that would be a shame for Danone. Transparency is a fantastic opportunity, but it's also a mindset, a culture. Bell could have said to their employees, "Oh no, it's expensive, and we don't have the time to develop this carbon tracking tool. Just go and look to our annual reports and follow our impact." Well, they didn't, and now they turned a reporting ask for their retailers into a fantastic collaboration, into a commercial contract that is benefiting for them. So, because they were the best position, they are transparent, they are the best position to address the expectations of their ecosystem, they were ready for when the retailers were ready. Time made it happen, and guess what? It's accelerating at an exponential rate. And it's not me. The best part is not me. It's not my opinion. It's what the science says. It's in the Holy Book. The IPCC report from 2017, in the IPCC report Global Warming of 1.5, you start to see the so-called shared socioeconomic pathways. So the experts said, okay, temperature rises, and the ecosystem will change, it will react. And they modelized this reaction with very precise forecast of socioeconomic changes. So for companies, it creates a lot of changes in their environment. So this is the environment of companies. There are physical risks, the outside world, impacted by climate change, but you also see finance, regulation, competition and new technologies, and the change of behavior of your clients, of your talents. This is the change that will impact companies with temperature rising. But reading the shared socioeconomic pathways, you can see how these changes will evolve. In 2017, we also saw some physical changes. We saw some finance with CDP starting in 2015, and regulation coming. But from 2016-17, we start to see the first concrete example of the changes of the ecosystem, of the clients' expectations, the talents, behavior, and competitive world. 2017, Walmart starts its Project Gigaton, asking its suppliers to fill very precise questionnaires. 2018, Pour un réveil écologique, the French Association of Students, with the top school, asked the same to the companies. 2019, you start to see in all the major all the major newspaper climate ranking of companies. And in the digital world, you even have this on search engine. You have the climate performance of your company. So it's on. And as we are working with OpenClimat, with all the ecosystem, we see this example multiplying. All the retailers are sending questionnaires. All the talents are now working and are concerned with by the climate action. So job boards integrate sustainability. Maybe tomorrow on LinkedIn. As we saw before, all the medias are doing that. And also consumers app and on the search engine. So maybe tomorrow on Google, you will find the climate performance of your company. So start being company. All this ecosystem, they want to have the information. They want you to be transparent. So act with them. Be transparent. This is the best way for you to be resilient, and this is the best way to drive your client preferences. Okay. So it's your ecosystem is ready for you. Are you ready to open up? Stop grumping at transparency. Be part of this changing world. So yes, transparency will make you happy, as I said. These are transparent companies that are always one step ahead of the new reporting requirements. These are transparent companies that drive preferences from their clients. These are transparent companies that always anticipate obligation and stop running after the next regulation disclosure obligation. But we all know that no matter the arguments, no matter the benefits, changing is always hard. It's the human. It's human. So despite all that, we need to challenge the old mentalities. The human beings don't like changing habits. You know you'll be happier if you go more often to the gym, but you need a kicker to start and take good habits. So well, for that, sometimes the best way is to project ourselves in a few years if we don't make it. The Sorry Children campaign. So Sorry Children is a message that you write to your children to explain that even though we knew the consequences, we didn't act fast enough. Like, Sorry Children, we thought that climate strike would be enough. So this picture, it reminded me why I joined this fight, why we shifted, why we came into sustainability, young generation or not. So we need to challenge the old way of doing business, and we need to do it now. We don't have the time. So go to the gym, take this new transparency habit, because none of us wants to have to write a message on the sign in 10 years. To conclude, I wanted to finish with one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. There is one, and that is at the end of it, And there is a reason because it is at the end of it. It's because it enables all the other. This is partnerships for the goals, and it is all transparency is about. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Vincent. That really was amazing to see the passion, the energy, the excitement for this topic. Go and see him. He's got a stand over there, OpenClimat. Thank you again to Vincent. So we now welcome our panel, Nancy Mahon, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer for the Estée Lauder companies, Sherry Madera, who is the CEO of CDP, and Sandra Uwera Murasa, who is the Global CEO for Fairtrade International. Please welcome them. Amazing panel, guys. This is a very exciting moment for me, certainly, to have you guys here. Thank you for coming. You've come from many different places, and you're here part of the energy. I'm going to, first of all, we've set the scene well with Vincent on his talking. We have 25 minutes, so we're going to go quickly and get into it. But before we start, I'd like each of you, please, just to introduce. And I'm going to start with Sandra. Just what do you do, and what does your organization do, and why are you here today?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for bringing us over. I was here yesterday, and I was very excited to see all the solution drivers in the room, sitting together as think tanks, as developers, and looking at the ecosystem that we live in and trying to put together solutions that can help us to make the world better. So it's a pleasure to be here, and that's why I'm here. I wanted to contribute to the discussions. So my name is Sandra Uwera. I work with Fairtrade International. I'm sure many of you know of our products. We are a global movement that represents 2 million producers around the world, and we are sourcing from about 1,700 producer organizations and selling to 71 countries. Our ethos, our narrative is to focus on social justice for producers. What does this mean? It means that when you're buying a Fairtrade certified product, you are giving back to the producers at the end of the supply chain, at the grassroots level. You are ensuring that a producer has a Fairtrade minimum price. A producer is able to get a premium that helps them to build their national ecosystem and strengthen their livelihoods in the space of adding more to their living income, building more on their living wages, and also helping them to become more sustainable within the ecosystems that they're operating in. And that's what we do. Amazing. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that in the context of data, transparency, and trade.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Nancy.
I'm Nancy Mann. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer of Estée Lauder Companies. We're a large beauty, fragrance, and makeup company. We're here to learn. We've really focused heavily on climate. And one of the pieces that we really focus on is how do we, as a large company, leverage our scale for solutions. And the bottom line, with all the great noise behind us, which I got to visit yesterday, is we don't have all the solutions at the right scale to hit our goals. And so we're here to learn. I also represent 42,000 employees, many of whom we have here today. We want everyone's job to be a climate job, and that business of embedding is a big piece of my job. So glad to be here. Thank you.
Amazing, thank you. Great. Sherry.
Great, thanks, James, and thank you for letting me be part of such an exciting panel. I'm Sherry Madera. I'm the CEO of CDP. I'm 6 months into this role, but the organization itself is 23 years strong. And essentially, CDP created the climate data ecosystem. It is the organization that first started asking questions about disclosure and transparency. So a super proud and honor for me to be leading this organization going forward. We now represent over 2/3 of the world's market cap. Over 85% of the S&P 500 report to us. We have incredible growth rates in terms of disclosure, not only in developed markets, but excitingly in Asia and in some of the global south. So again, we're very much in line with what was said before, and we're looking forward to make sure that data isn't just about data for data's sake. Data has got to be used. We need to think about the use cases and how the actions really bring a more Earth-positive planet.
So thank you, Sherry. And that kind of whole idea of data for action is really, really important. So Nancy, give us a kind of...
No, it's a great point, and we work very closely with CDP, so glad to be on the panel
Thank
with you. At the end of the day, what we really want the data to be is not only to transparently report, but to manage. And so shifting from reporting data to managerial data so that we have real-time KPIs within the business. So for instance, the folks in supply chain that decide whether something is going to be air shipped or freight shipped, for them to understand the carbon impact of that. I think the other thing to remember is we really need to harmonize our reporting systems. Yeah. Because the bottom line is the folks on our team, I was talking to Sherry before, who are reporting on water or reporting on climate, are also doing the actual work within the company. And so harmonization is very, very important as we look across these various indices. And then lastly, it really should be, for companies like ours, it is a very humbling journey to achieve our climate goals. And so what we want to do also is remain open and remain honest about what is going well and what isn't going well, and making sure that we have an environment where we're able to do that.
And you're in a transition, effectively.
We're all in a transition,
all the time, right?
Absolutely.
And so you're driving that, and business as that force for transition is so important.
Absolutely. And like most companies, about 95% of our footprint is our supply chain. And so this ability to work with CDP, for instance, and have a third party collecting data that we can use for Scope 3 as well as our competitors is critically, critically important. And again, having data that means something to your frontline teams and incorporating that into their job in, candidly, a fair and accurate way is critically important, and that's why we're so glad to be here.
Brilliant. And Sandra, you have, I mean, you're right at the tough end of the supply chain, right, with your producers and your responsible sourcing. I mean, for me, it feels like sometimes almost impossible to understand how that's all going. How are you using data? Give us a little perspective from your point of view, and remind me how long Fairtrade has been around, because I seem to remember your mark on products for many, many years.
Well, we've been around, we've been in the market for about 30 years. We are driven by producers. Producers are at the center of our business models, and especially in this case, data. But just to touch on what you're asking, in terms of access to data, we recognize, especially this year as part of our growth targets, that data is really core to helping us tell the stories of producers out there. But most importantly, we believe data governance is very important because data has to be used responsibly. So one of the programs that we have done, I'll give an example of the cocoa sector in West Africa, is that we have, since 2019, we've been working with the cocoa sector to set up information management systems. As you're well aware, not every farmer will have a very keen understanding about how to input data into very sophisticated, intricate systems. So we have worked very closely with partners on the ground, in this case FarmForce, where in 2022 we set up an information system where we're able to collect data from farmers at the producer organization level and trace cocoa to the first mile farmer. We've been able to translate this information within FarmForce to provide predictive analysis of some of the inherent challenges and the risks that they're facing on the ground. As you well know, we're right now operating in an ever-evolving regulatory landscape that's looking at where we have the EUDR, the EU Deforestation Regulation, and the EU Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Regulation coming into play. So right now we're using this data to be able to inform our companies, our corporates, our customers, and our consumers about the inherent risks on the ground and how we're setting up programmatic approaches to address those risks. So where there's deforestation, we are addressing those risks by setting up a programmatic approach on dynamic agroforestry, where we're intercropping in those particular lands to create more climate resilient products that we can sell locally, even as we sell cocoa internationally. And these are just a few of those examples. So that's how you can take data into action.
That's amazing. And when we have our cup of coffee or cup of cocoa, remember who's picked who's been there behind it. And we often think about last mile. We talk about it the whole time, last mile delivery. But what about that first mile and the person who's at the end of that? And we are all humans in the end, and there's humans at the other end of it. So it's very important. The other thing I picked up on is data governance. There's one thing having data, but it has to be governed properly. Yeah. Moving swiftly on to regulation, Sherry, give us a perspective on kind of how regulation is affecting this traceability, transparency kind of topic.
Yeah, thanks. I think that actually we can kind of get fixated on regulation because obviously it's a great big stick. And companies and corporates start thinking about, and Nancy and many others, are talking about this. How is it that we're prepared for this, especially here in the EU, who's at the vanguard of thinking about disclosure as becoming very much in the foreground of thinking about regulation and compliance. But the reality is, James, that actually the same data that's being used for compliance, for disclosure, for transparency, is the same data we use for action. So Nancy talked about the supply chain, and Sandra was also speaking about how you go into that last mile and you pull all that information right up into you as a use case, you as a consumer, a business as how they're using all of these products and the disclosure that comes before. Yes, that's scope 3, right? If we're going to start getting technical about it, about why we're disclosing. But the reality is you can reach back into that supply chain, use the data, start saying, how is it that we can make this better? What action can we work together on through the data to be able to create targets, to create incentives that are real incentives for those that are disclosing and move it through? So compliance is only one piece. The way I look at it, try and keep things simple. Data can get complicated. The reality is that there are only 3 ways of actually a CFO or a CEO or a board to think about climate and nature data. They need it for access to capital. Increasingly, the capital markets are needing this information. Increasingly, we're seeing from CDP, the private markets are needing this information. Access to capital, really essential. The second is business efficiency and your own use cases, attracting, retaining talent. They want to know this data, not just in words, but in fact. And they also need it for supply chain, thinking about how your procurement decisions are being made, how you make that efficient. So access to capital, business efficiencies and use cases, and finally that compliance piece. Let's keep it simple. It's the ABCs of climate and nature data. And I think that when you pair that with the concept of writing that data once and using it many, then we create an efficiency that is going to be able to drive this ecosystem forward to not focus only on thinking about getting that reporting right, but getting the use of that data right. Because every dollar that's spent on reporting is a dollar we can't spend on action. And we all have to be as efficient as possible. So that's why CDP is trying to step up there globally to create comparable data that's used for many.
Amazing.
Can I
Nancy,
say
please.
amen?
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
So fully agree with those points. I think the other, when we talk about data governance, again, what we really want to do is be able to have operational managerial data. And that's because if you look at the environmental space and the social space, if you're just focusing on climate, you might miss with regard to plastics. And so also creating teams across the matrix that are able to work with one another around these issues. I just wanted to pick up on the availability of capital issue. I spend about a third of my time with investors, and glad to see you have investors here. The bottom line is climate risk is financial risk. And what's helped us, candidly, in the movement is the notion that climate data should have the integrity that financial data has. And while that's a very high standard, what we've seen is many of our investors have portfolio climate goals. You'll see at the end of our CNS report, we have pages and pages of data. And while the other stories are very important, as are the pictures and the employee engagement, what's really important to investors are those numbers. And again, the more we can move towards harmonization and understanding of climate risk as financial risk, the better we will be. Another point that Sherry made around employees. We've done employee surveys, and the most important environmental issue to our employees, climate. And of that, green buildings. So what I would also encourage you to understand that the change starts at home. Yep. You should think about yourself. What are you actually doing in your home life? What are you doing as an employee? Because at the end of the day, if you look at these Scope 3 goals, the only way we are going to get there together is if every employee in every company mobilizes themselves at home. And also, I'm so impressed with the entrepreneurism here. We also need intrapreneurism. How do people within these large companies like ours that are able to spend funds on climate, how are they inventing the next solution and piloting some of the solutions you see behind us?
Amazing. And as a fact, something you said, spending a third of your time with investors. So, the Chief Sustainability Officer, that's great progress because that's where the money is, right? So,
absolutely.
It's fantastic to hear that.
Yeah, and also you are all investors. You're retail investors.
Yeah.
Really, the evolution that we've seen in the field is we have more investors, women, and we have more young people.
Yeah.
And so even if you're in a quote unquote passive fund, take a look at what you are investing in for your pension and make sure that it aligns with your values. And when you buy products, educate yourself. The professionals' presentation around climate, critically important. For companies like ours, you are essentially voting with your wallet. So make sure that you understand the values of the companies that you are buying their products. And then lastly, I do want to give a shout out to our retail partners. Sephora is here doing some wonderful work. More and more and more, we are seeing how does climate, how does purpose show up at retail? How do we talk about this work in a meaningful way to you all as you are purchasing? And I would say encourage your retailers to do that and ask questions as you're purchasing.
Couldn't agree more. And it's this agenda as a value creator and as an attractor for customers. And Sandra, you'd have a perspective on how the Fairtrade mark plays with customers and consumers, and how are you seeing customer evolution on this agenda?
Thank you for that question. First of all, I want to just say, Nancy, you reminded me of a term. Digitalization is about the merger of business and technology. And when we think about it in that context, you actually see how we use digitalization to push forward capital, investments, and market share. It's quite, you brought that, I remembered that. So in our case, we look at core market access for efficiency. One of our key interests is strengthening traceability so that we're able to tell customers, our corporate companies, and consumers about what is happening on the ground and how they can make strategic investment decisions within the distribution channels and the supply chains to build more, to tape a commercial interest with development agendas. We do this through our FlowCert identifier. This is a 4 to 7 digit code, or in some cases, depending on the market preferences, we have a QR code that helps you to trace, that helps you to scan the code and get to understand some of the challenges on the ground, or just even have a serial overview of how your investment within the supply chain is beneficial for the producers, and also helps to build a better quality product that is being sold in the market. So when you scan, when you input this 4 to 7 digit code, our Flow ID, you're able to see the schematics of the production chain. You're able to see storage facilities in some of our flower farms. You're able to see the protection mechanisms we have set up through our hired labor standards. You're able to see health and safety requirements at work. You're also able to see gender representation, how we ensure that our standards apply gender representation in the workplace, and also strengthens good working conditions. Beyond that, I'm sure many of you have bought Fairtrade flowers. Next time you do, please look for the QR code and you'll be able to access a virtual flower farm tour. This gives you access to understanding how we have used premium investments within the ecosystems of the flower farms in Kenya, as an example. And through that, you're able to see our parking systems, our storage systems, our water storage systems. You're able to see how we use greenhouses for the flowers. You're also able to understand the nature of the people behind the flowers, the hired labor within the flower farms, and how they're operating and what they're benefiting from through the premium. So we look at data as a way of improving market efficiency and bringing our customers and consumers closer to the bottom of the supply chain. And that's why it's very beneficial.
And I love the fact that you're telling stories.
Yes.
You're telling a story which is very compelling. I mean, great brands like in your company, Nancy, they're storytellers, aren't they? They're telling stories. They're creating that the aura around the product, which is driving consumers. I just want to say there is also a massive difference between fair trade and non-fair trade, and it's not ideal what's going on in some of these supply chains. So, being able to have confidence, and my next question is, Nancy or Sherry, is do we bring some of that information to consumers in a more kind of, some of this data coming through in the way that Sandra's talking about? Is that coming through? Are you doing that?
Yes,
Nancy,
we focus a great deal on the communities where we live, work, and source. And Sandra's point about the communities where products are coming from is critically important. And one of the potentially, I'd say, negative effects of some of the regulation is that we might eliminate local business. And so, for instance, around palm, we use a fair amount of palm oil, not as much as the food industry. But what we've done is partner with Business for Social Responsibility to work with the women, they were primarily sourced by women, and increase their sort of financial literacy. And so I think it's very, very important that we do, as Sandra said, understand where these products are coming from and who are the people. How can we connect, to your point, James, the consumer and those communities, and that we respect and we grow those local industries, and we clarify some of the invisibility in the supply chain.
Yeah, brilliant.
And of course, I would say the invisibility, Nancy, comes with trying to find a reasonable amount of data. And I'm saying that again, a reasonable amount of data. We work globally. I have had the pleasure in the last 6 months of talking to 350 of the world's largest supply chain members, either directly or indirectly. And there's a huge amount of reporting burden that goes on. So as we're starting to think about more data, I'd encourage us all to think about how it is that we're using that data. And partnering with our friends at Estée Lauder, maybe what we need to do is really think about each of those data points and how it is going to give insight and lead to action before we start asking for it. And again, that's something that we're working closely with policymakers globally in order to make sure that there is an efficiency that goes on there as well. Because we're not only just talking about climate data. CDP has been collecting data on water and forests for over 10 years. Now, arguably, that was before much of the world was understanding where and how that was being used. Well, now that is actually very much mainstream when you're thinking about nature. How is it the effects and impacts on nature? Things like the Task Force for Nature-Based Financial Disclosures are now becoming something that people are talking about. And again, if you're talking about it, you've got a principle for it. If you've got a principle, you're starting to develop frameworks. Then you go into the world of standards. And here we are, CDP, to try and make sure that that translates into real data, into data that actually can be reported, that there can be confidence in, that there can be comparability in, and that it is being used. So again, if we can start making sure that that becomes our bottom basement, that we're going to try and make more efficient this entire market so that we can accelerate that.
So I'm just going to, the terrible red numbers are coming on, so we have only 4 minutes left, and I want to just let you, each of you, just have a couple of closing remarks. It's just going into the helicopter. We're in this amazing place, and we're all here for the sort of same reason. But when you look out and you look out at what's going on in the world, two things to maybe think about in your closing remarks. One is, how do you feel? Do you feel positive? How are we doing? And then secondly, what would you like the audience to take away from you? Just one thing. And I'll start, Sandra, with you, please, and then come back along.
Okay, I'll be very quick. I'm naturally a very positive person, so I'm optimistic about the solutions we're bringing to the table, and we'll put them into action. I have two calls for action. The first one is data responsibility. I'd like to encourage all the corporate companies here in the room that when you access data, use it to reinvest back in your supply chains and build more capacity. Commercial interests must be tempered with development, and it's important that this discussion is had at a shareholder level, where we don't just think about short-term profits. We had a discussion about this last night, but long-term returns of investments. So please use that data to build more capacity at the grassroots level, especially where products are coming from. The future of food lies in how you decide how to use data to build more within your supply chains. And then secondly, it's important that we bring all our multi-stakeholders to have a system-wide approach about data governance, data use, and data action. This is a conversation that just can't be had by one part of the ecosystem. We really need to think about it holistically, and we need to think about it with the producers, the farmers, and workers at the center of those discussions, because they do own the data is coming from them, but it's important that we also build their capacity to understand how they can use that data back into strengthening their businesses and making them more competitive, and also promoting decent livelihoods at a grassroots level. Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
Sherry.
I think my take-home point would be that disclosing climate data is not a nice-to-have. It is a must-have for your core business. If you're a small business, if you're a large business, if you're a multinational, increasingly you are going to lose clients, you're going to lose investors, and you're going to lose talent if you're not aware of what you can measure with your own disclosures. Because what you can measure, you can then manage.
Amazing.
Fully agree. Very important to measure and manage. I think the other. I spent a great deal of time in the AIDS movement, and I remember one of the great leaders said to a very large room like this, "We will look back and we will say, what did we make of this moment?" And that's the moment we're in. And so, as a big company that's successful, we need your help. We need your help understanding that we are trying to be more transparent. We're not perfect. We're on a journey, but also to help us, I would say, in terms of your consumer choices. Buy from companies that are climate friendly and become part of the movement. And as an employee, come to your CSO, or if there isn't a CSO, go to your head of supply chain. How is it that I can be part of that movement? And again, for me, the biggest question now is we do not have enough solutions on the table and we do not have scale. And so whatever your background, if you're an expert in scaling, then help us pilot at companies like ours these solutions. And thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Amazing. Thank you. So, look, I mean, I have 48 seconds to try and sum all that up. I mean, we could probably spend a long time having this conversation. The inspiration that comes from your leadership, all of you, in what you're doing is so important, so critical, and so powerful. And it's been eye-opening for me, and I feel very encouraged, actually, from this panel. And I think we can all go out and we can help scale. You know, if we can help scale, then this can be solved, and the moment is very, very important. So
thank the scale in the room. Thank you all for being here.
Exactly. So thank you all, and Nancy, Sherry, Sandra, great pleasure to have you. Thank you. So you guys are going to go off there. Thank you so much. Great. So, wow, told you it would be good. So now we have an amazing fireside chat, which we're going to talk about the topic of AI. So I don't think anyone should leave if we're going to be talking about the topic of AI now, because this is very, very important, very critical. I have a fireside chat, so we're going to spend 20 minutes talking to an incredible entrepreneur, a lady called Charlotte Degot, who is the CEO and co-founder of CO2 AI. Charlotte, welcome. Round of applause. Perfect. Thank you very much, Charlotte, for coming. So that was something, wasn't it? We covered a lot of ground in that last panel to set some context to this. Yeah. The fireside chat is sometimes my favorite part of these panels because it gives us a bit of time to dig deeply. And your story, we've had a few meetings over the past couple of weeks, is incredibly powerful. And of course, you are in the topic du jour, as they say, because you are mixing AI into this whole climate debate. So I'm going to start by just asking you to explain your business and what you do, and then we're going to dig into a couple of other things and have some concrete examples of how you're making that change.
Sure. So hello, everyone. I'm Charlotte Degot. I'm the founder and CEO of CO2 AI. And what we do is help the world's largest organizations on their end-to-end net zero journeys, from measuring their emissions to actually reducing them. We work with companies like Accor, Pernod Ricard, Cisco, General Mills, so very large international organizations who are on a journey to reduce their emissions, but need a lot of things to be put in place to actually achieve that.
Fantastic. And your origin story is very interesting because you were at BCG, right? Tell us how you got into this topic and how you kind of thought it would be good to start your own business or spin out your own business.
So actually, I spent more than 10 years at BCG, the consulting firm, so quite a long time. And I did work with large companies on many strategic topics. And over the last years, I was really working on artificial intelligence and how to use tech to really enable companies to solve their biggest, most strategic issues. And progressively, it appeared that the biggest issues of all, from a strategic perspective, was sustainability. And it was almost natural to start applying AI to the sustainability issues. That's the perfect playground, honestly, to put AI on. Lots of data, lots of issues with the data, a lot of need for transparency, as the great panelist before just explained. So CO2AI was born, helping some BCG clients at the beginning with their issues on data, and ultimately we realized that it was better to make it a proper standalone, long-lasting business to be able to serve those companies in the long run.
So amazing. So you then you span it out and set it up as its own business, with BCG still involved as a
Yes, it was of course a common decision with BCG, where we all felt that it was the best decision to power boost CO2A and to make sure that it could serve its clients in the right way for the long run, for the next 5, 10, 30 years, in line with their commitments in terms of carbon reduction. BCG is still highly involved. The chairman of BCG is at the board of CO2A, so we are still very close, but we are operating as a 100% focused team on helping our clients on their net zero journey.
And how? So you were right at the beginning of the AI movement before we were talking about it, when you were starting all of this. And how do you keep current? How do you stay up to date? And what's your kind of perspective? Because it's moving so fast. So how does that all work in your world?
So it's very tough. It goes very fast. At some point, I went back to school, actually, to really step up in AI for a while as part of executive education, still working part-time. Now I also rely on my team. I have a great team of experts in artificial intelligence who really follow the trends and who are experts in the new waves like generative AI, etc. That's a space that evolves so fast, but it's also so promising, especially for the topics we are discussing today, where data is at the center of everything. We need to be a lot better than we are on data management in sustainability, and AI is a key enabler to do that faster with less effort and to focus on action rather than just cleaning manually the data, for example.
Yeah. So if we talk a bit about the main problems that you're seeing today that you are solving at CO2AI, and how, just can you give us a sense of, what a client would come to you with, and how you would help them solve the problem in a more efficient and a more action-oriented way?
So, just to start with, today, 95% of companies' advocacies are not in line with the Paris Agreement. 95%. So if the room was representing the 100% of companies, like half of the front row would probably be in line with the Paris Agreement. So there is a huge wave of effort that needs to be put in place to actually put companies in line with a 1.5 to 2 degrees world. And the first step is to actually measure properly what we're talking about. It's the transparency that the previous panelists were talking about. 10% of companies today, only 10% are measuring comprehensively their emissions. How can you hope to decrease, even to start a reduction pathway, if you don't know where your emissions are, where your hotspots are, etc. So that's exactly what we help companies with at CO2AI. We help them set up a proper measurement, which is solid enough, granular enough, to be able to have good data to rely on. And then we help them with strategic insights and operationalization. It's a software, basically, where you can, like financial data, automate your flows, know where you are at any point in time, and then make decisions and cascade those decisions in your organizations to be able to say to procurement, now we are going to change the way we engage with suppliers, now we are going to change this type of raw materials because we are not in line with the total carbon footprint it brings, etc., etc. So
we talked a bit about investors in the previous panel, and I can see some investors in the room here. How is the investment community reacting? Are you called in by private equity firms to help on due diligence around this, or are you finding that investors are insisting on it? Because there's only 10% of companies who are in line. So, is that an important part of your work?
Investors is clearly a driving force to push companies in the right direction. In our case at CO2AI, we work with very, very large organizations. I was mentioning a few like Pernod Ricard, Accor, Cisco, Volvo, etc. Those are companies who have, even beyond investors, set goals for themselves, and they know that they need to accelerate on the way they measure data and they act on this data. So I would say investors are very important, and they need to continue the push. But fortunately, the people are more and more realizing that they need to act, and for themselves and for their own competitive advantage and long-lasting future, starting to put things in place that are very ambitious.
And do you, is there a kind of role for that whole, we talk also a little bit about storytelling and the kind of bringing it to life a bit more with some of the customer side of things, or is it more in the bigger company as a sort of B2B play only, or is it coming through to consumers to create that value?
So I would say the ecosystem in a broad sense, so customers, consumers, suppliers, is extremely important. Because even a large company, Nancy was mentioning it about the Scope 3 emissions of Estée Lauder. 95% of emissions are 95% are usually outside the own operations of a business. So it's extremely important to very soon in the journey, very early, engage players around you, suppliers, customers, consumers, to be able to accelerate the decarbonization, and also to be able to show the progress and to communicate on this progress.
Yep.
All this ultimately is for greater transparency and faster progress.
And it's all stakeholders, as you say. It's the internal as well as the external, and also the customers. So I couldn't go through this without asking you about, some of the conversations around AI and how dangerous it might be and all of those sorts of things. And we talked about data governance, the ethics of what's going on. How do you navigate that?
So at CO2AI, the way we use the data is pretty ethical, and we do not really face these kind of issues, because to describe a little bit what we do, when you compute a carbon footprint, for example, for a large company, it's extremely complex. You need to gather pretty much data from every system in the organization to be able to reflect all the activities that the company is doing, all the products and services they buy from their suppliers, etc. So that's an amount of data that gets crazy very fast. We work with retailers who have tens of millions of rows of data that they need to refresh each time they want to recompute their carbon footprint. So the way we use AI here is extremely useful and at the same time extremely safe. It's reading the data and matching it with emission factors in an extremely fast way. We reduce by 90% the efforts that are needed by humans to compute a carbon footprint. It used to take months to those companies to compute a carbon footprint. It takes them hours.
So you reduce it by 90%?
Yes.
Which is a 90% reduction is amazing in terms of human engagement.
And it brings more granularity, so ultimately ability to use the data in a better way, because you can really have actionable data.
And who's your client in the organization normally? Is it the sustainability teams, or is it the CEOs, or strategy?
It depends.
Yeah.
And I would say it depends of the maturity stage of the company. When the companies are starting their journey, it's usually the sustainability team, so the CSO and his or her team. And then progressively we expand, and we see more and more procurement CPOs who get involved because they get the mandate of reducing their Scope 3 emissions and to embark their buyers and their suppliers in the journey. And you end up with thousands of people using CO2AI in the organizations. At Volvo, for example, we have thousands of buyers who are using the platform in day-to-day to know what to discuss with their suppliers.
Wow. Yeah. So it's, I can see that's extraordinary. And how many people are you in your organization now in CO2AI?
How many people?
Yeah.
45.
So there are 45 people. I won't ask you what your sales are, but I'm sure they're pretty good. So this is an amazing example of efficiency internally, but also bringing not only the actionable data and the insights, but also great efficiency to your clients. Do you ever think of using the technology for other parts of it. We had a big circularity conversation yesterday and around tracking materials and non-carbon. Do you think about that?
Of course.
Where do you think the next frontier might be?
So for me, all environmental data is going pretty much together. It's important to take the impacts of the different KPIs in a holistic vision, because one improvement on carbon can lead to not so much improvement on water, etc.
Yep.
For us, really, at the moment, the next frontier is also, we were talking about ecosystem, and for us, it's really also about unlocking this ecosystem power. CO2A is a proud partner of CDP. We work together on building a platform that is called Product Ecosystem that allows customers and suppliers of the same value chain to exchange data in a safe way, in a standard way, so that they can do it once and reshare many times. Yep. Estée Lauder, actually, who was also there, is using product ecosystem actively. And for me, this is really where there is a huge power of acceleration. Making sure that companies are embarking their suppliers, their ecosystem, and suppliers embarking their own suppliers in the journey, and starting to share in a transparent manner, to the point of this session, their data, so that we can finally know where we need to act and reduce.
And do you see companies willing to collaborate, competitive companies, agreeing to share data and work together? I mean, I think there was a pre-competitive was a kind of an expression that was used. So is this something that is the greater good is more important, and therefore we need to scale fast? So
yeah,
the competitiveness goes away a bit.
Honestly, I was surprised because starting the journey with CDP on product ecosystem and on sharing data, I was really worried about that, about companies saying, no, I'm not going to share this data, it's too important to me to be sharing it broadly. Actually, I'm surprised, but the perspective is more, I'm building a competitive advantage by sharing this with my customer. I'm remaining in the game. Yep. I'm actually strengthening my relationship with my customer. I know what matters to him, so I can make effort as a supplier where it matters. And this is the way the challenge should be seen. Yeah,
fantastic. And do you want to, is there anything you can share with us in terms of an example of a client that's sort of made changes with using CO2 AI and, I don't know, change their business in some way? Can you do that? Can you give me a concrete example?
Yes, sure. Yeah. So we work with, I mentioned a few retailers or consumer goods companies like Cisco, General Mills, Reckitt. All these companies, they are at the stage where first they are using CO2A to get much better data, much better granularity on their emissions, typically Scope 3, where they have set targets, but not necessarily always have the right data to be acting on these targets. So that's one where we put real-time automated computation of emissions to be able to help them know where they are and make the CSO accountable for the targets that they have set, right? Because we were in a world where sometimes it felt a bit like good intentions, like we will take action, but we don't know how to measure the results. We don't know where we are, but it's hard, data, etc. Yeah. We're moving to a world where the CSO is as well equipped as the CFO, or almost. There is, of course, still estimations in sustainability data, but they have data that is decision useful, that is granular enough to be able to track progress. And therefore, they become very important. The CSO role is also gaining in importance because they can actually report progress. They can actually be accountable for numbers and KPIs, which is extremely important. So that's one example. A second example is Volvo, where we work with them on actually making their suppliers' emission lower by embarking their buyers, thousands of people in the journey, and helping them help their own suppliers in decarbonizing.
Amazing. No, that's fantastic. So I've completely forgotten what I was going to say next, but I'm allowed to do that. We're almost, where the red lights are on. So what I was going to ask you is, when you look out, and we're kind of, I mean, I think you've created something which is making lives a lot easier for, and you're arming the CSOs really, which is really good, because I've always slightly felt the CSOs don't have that impact in the organization. They're sort of there, and it's like ESG and all that. But to hear Nancy talking, who has huge influence and power, 30% of her time with investors, and you're giving the tools to have those conversations with the investors and with the broader community. So that's extraordinary.
I totally agree with that. We come from a world where the CSO role, and I'm going to be a bit provocative here, was a very weak role. And that's a big mistake. The CSO role is going to be the most important role, the most strategic role. They are going to be the future CEOs. They are the ones who are thinking the future of the company and building the real competitive advantage for the next 10, 20 years. But you cannot ask a CSO to be strong and to be to embody this kind of power without any numbers, without any KPIs, without any progress tracking. So it's extremely important, the wave we are in at the moment of finally getting into the data and making this data useful and tracking from this data the progress that is being made is extremely important, and it's actually the right way to give the power to the CSO and make sure that they can have this strategic role that they deserve.
It's fantastic. No, I mean, I think if we take something away from that, from today, one thing, the CSO is the next CEO, and having the data and having the power and the leadership is incredible. So, and it's very encouraging to hear that you're seeing that. So we have 1 minute 31 left. Just wrapping and talking about your journey and how, the pivotal roles. I mean, this is accelerating really fast, and congratulations, it's incredible. But what are a couple of moments that have been important to you along the way?
There are so many moments, and I think there are many more to come. Maybe one was like 4 years ago, I came to ChangeNOW for the first time, and I was in the audience, and I was wondering what I can do, actually, how I can do my part in this change that needs to happen. And today I'm here sharing the journey that I started pretty much at the same time as the first time I came to ChangeNOW. And maybe my message is that we all have a huge power to make things change. And if we start and if we act, there is no reason why it would not ultimately contribute to accelerate, to make the world accelerate.
It's fantastic, and I think Santiago would be delighted to hear that, because the ChangeNOW as a catalyst for that change, and hearing your story and seeing the incredible progress. I don't think this is the last we're going to see of you. I think your business is going to be very, very successful. And I thank you so much, Charlotte, for sharing with us and spending some time with us, and to all of you for sitting through what has been an amazing session. So thank you so much. Well done. Okay, we're off.